Hello and welcome back to EDUC 588, Module 3 about academic language. The video lecture for this module is going to be a webinar style. So instead of having 3 short videos, we're going to have one long webinar that will take about 45 minutes. If you don't have 45 minutes, that's okay. You can pause and come back to it at any time. Allow me to share my screen. This is Module 3, Academic Language Acquisition and Methods. This is a 45-minute webinar, but like I said, you can pause at any time. You're going to need a computer or a tablet with an internet connection, audio and video. You also could have a printed copy of the handouts, which you can find posted in Brightspace. You could also work on them in Google Chrome, in Google Docs. I really just like anytime we have a lecture or work to do, give yourself a quiet space where you can concentrate. You deserve that time for learning. Here are our essential questions for today. What is academic language? How is academic language essential to all content areas for multilingual learners? And how can we reinforce academic language for multilingual learners? This is in addition to your reading in our course text, Paraguay and Boyle. This is an additional webinar that draws from that, but you will have your readings and your reading quizzes, and then this webinar in addition to that. In our time together, you will review our understanding of academic language across the content areas, discuss the importance of academic language for multilingual learners, and explore strategies and practice methods to reinforce them. We're going to have some warm-up. We're going to review academic language. We're going to discuss individually. We're going to workshop and practice analyzing academic language, and then we'll have a summary and a debrief. Here's our warm-up activity. Take a minute and read the following. What do you think? Could you read it? Did you understand this paragraph, or was it a challenge for you? If you were able to read it, you might have found that it is said that the literate mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole. This is true for people with a high level of proficiency in the English language and a high level of literacy. For our students who are emerging bilinguals, emerging readers, emerging writers, this is not true. They need support with reading and academic language in order to reach to these high levels of proficiency where you might not read every letter. But at the stage most of our learners are reading, they do read every letter, and they need our support to remember and understand the words. Academic language happens within a sociocultural context. This diagram is similar to the one we saw in Module 2. It explains that everything we do with language happens as a part of communication in our society. And it's organized. This is what we call the discourse level. It's how we organize our language so we can communicate. At the next level down are the little puzzle pieces of the sentence, and that's what we call grammar and syntax. And then those words we put together in sentences are vocabulary. Academic language takes a part of all of this, both from the word level, the sentence level, and the discourse level to work in a sociocultural context. So just to review, what is academic language? Nagy and Townsend say that the academic language is the specialized language, both oral and written, of academic settings that facilitates communication and thinking about disciplinary content. Some of us say it's just words, but it is words, but it is more than just vocabulary. It's the combination of the content and the structure. So it's not just the words, it's also knowing how we're supposed to combine the structure. That's academic language. So we have academic words, which are important, but academic language is greater than the vocabulary. It's the structure and the content. These are some of the key elements of academic language. This is borrowed from Lexia. So we have the vocabulary level. These can be complex words with prefixes, suffixes, roots. This is something we can teach to support. It can be general academic words that have a high frequency across content areas, or discipline-specific words. These are the ones usually with Greek or Latin roots specific to that content area, especially in the sciences. It's also syntactic knowledge. Syntax is sentence. It's those connecting words and structures that we use. Words like therefore, whereas, however, consequently, and, whom. It's conventions of reference and evidence. An example of this is when we say a sentence like, we examine the extent to which native plants in coastal regions adapted to climatic changes in their environment. Whose environment? The native plants. But we have to have syntactic knowledge of reference referring back to the native plants to know who their environment is. We also need to have grammatical agreement. One example of this would be to say, all of the candidates, as well as the current president, are attending the televised debate. We would have to be able to discern that all of the candidates means it's plural, including the current president. A lot of times we'll see our students write something or say something like, all the candidates, as well as the current president, is attending the televised debate. And while that non-standard structure is comprehensible and acceptable, the target academic language would be to have grammatical agreement with using R. So why does this matter? Who cares? Right? We talk about accepting all language, translanguaging, accepting non-standard language. But then I'm here telling you all this is really important. So just take a minute and think about it. Think about your content area. Think about the input, reading and listening. Think about the output. What about these modalities? Think about expectations and standards for our students. Why? Why does this matter? Why does it matter to you? You could also jot this down in your note document that goes with this webinar. We'll probably have a variety of answers around why academic language matters. And it's going to differ for you depending on how much evidence of learning in writing happens in your content areas. For me, academic language matters because while I am a descriptive grammarian and accepting of all forms of language, translanguaging, and non-standard language, I still believe communicating in academic language is valuable for our students' literacy and also for their future academic growth. It's important. It's not the only thing that's important, but it's worthwhile. So, how do we teach academic language? This is always one of my favorite Garfields. I know Garfield is kind of a throwback. Not everybody knows about Garfield. But when I was a kid, I have a very strong memory of one of my teachers, Sue Blank. She had this poster. It was different from this one. This is the only one I could find on the internet. In her poster, Garfield was sleeping on a stack of books. But this idea of learning by osmosis. Osmosis is an academic language word from science. And I always just thought it was amusing because I wished I could just put a book to my head or my body and then absorb it. But that's not how it happens. That's not how our students learn. We know this from being in the third course of our program. Exposure is not enough. We have to directly teach academic language. Sorry, Garfield, although you are just the cutest and I love you. So how do we teach it? What do we do? What are the methods? Planning, instruction, assessment. Planning, instruction, assessment. It doesn't happen naturally. We have to plan it, teach it, and assess it. We do need language-rich classrooms for exposure, library, charts, read-alouds, but learning will not happen by osmosis. We have to do explicit instruction. We have to point out the words, their relationships, and model structure and vocabulary for our students. We have to use the learning strategies we've been talking about so far in this course. This includes strategies, graphic organizers, and we have to use them across all content areas. This way, students can collect and examine words and ideas. And we have to do assessment. We have to actually assess the academic language goals. track the progress, and then reteach and reinforce. We can't expect it just to happen and assume it happens. We have to assess it to see how they're doing and then reteach. This is the link, planning, instruction, assessment. It's what we do. It's our job. It's so exciting. Okay, so let's do some practice. You're going to apply the concepts of teaching academic language based on your experience, prior knowledge, and the materials provided in the webinar handouts. As you work through, use these handouts to take notes. This is time when you're just going to pause the video. I'm not going to let the video run for the time that you need because we all work at our own pace, but you'll pause the video. So take a minute and look at these times to reflect on academic language. We're going to start with some word problems in math. So go ahead and refer to the handouts on page 4. Take 10 minutes to complete the math problems. Then answer the following questions in your handout. What language do you think might be difficult? And what could you do to support your learners? So at this point, pause the video, go to page 4, and work on this. After you finish that activity, move on to the next one. Go to page 5. Follow the instructions and read the passages. For passage 1, you're going to circle an example of a key word, underline an example of a frequently used word, and then put a star next to a general academic word. For passage 2, put a square around the word with multiple meanings and draw an arrow to a word with an affix. This will also take you about 10 minutes, so pause the video and work on it. Now that we've practiced those 2 activities, on page 6, brainstorm ideas for introducing and practicing new vocabulary. Part of this, all these activities, I want to teach you a strategy called student-friendly definitions. Here's a word that is an academic language word we use across content areas. It's consequence. We also use this a lot in the field of education and classroom management. There are consequences. What is the consequence of this? So consequence, this is the dictionary definition from the Google. It's a count noun. It's something that happens as a result of a particular action or set of conditions. Something could also have consequence, and that's a non-count noun, and it's something to have importance or valuable. That she was a lady of consequence. Everyone respected her. So continue on page 6 of your handout and answer the questions about student-friendly definitions and come up with a solution to present the definition of each word. Practice with this. I want to show you another strategy. This one is called the interactive word wall. Let's watch it together.
So today we use the interactive word wall as a concept map. When students enter the room, the vocabulary, words, and phrases are already spread out on the floor. First thing I want you to do is identify some vocab words and phrases that you know you can make connections with other words. When a student comes to the middle of the interactive word wall, they are connecting their vocab word or phrase to a previous vocabulary word or phrase using the arrows. And when they place their words, they need to explain the connection that they see or understand.
I put collaboration because they had to collaborate to complete some of their strategies in one.
Some casualties in the cost of war.
Would be a violent after consequences because the soldiers weren't the only consequences. For instance, in the war, they feel to be believed.
The purpose of an interactive word wall is to have students grapple with vocabulary that they're working on in class in an engaging and hands-on way. They're really illustrating the connection with those arrows. Some connections that students are able to make regularly would be cause and effect relationships. Veterans made sacrifices, therefore we honor them when they come home. It helps students literally see the connections between words. Students are able to build upon each other's ideas. They are using vocabulary words in context. And it's a great way to scaffold through the writing process and prepare students to write using these vocabulary words. This allows them to synthesize all these concepts and all these vocab terms in ways that helps them put it all together.
That's a nice classroom up in Syracuse, not too far from some of y'all. What do you think? Would you use that interactive word wall? How did they use that word we unpacked earlier, consequence? Think about it. Go to page 7 of your handout and answer the questions about the interactive word wall. Now we're going to move on to page 8. We're going to talk about vocabulary for in-depth focus. So there's 2 texts in the back of your packet on pages 13 and 14. One is a K1 text called Amazing Whales. I love whales. I think they're super cool. And another is from an excerpt from a nonfiction text. From a fiction text called The Great Fire. And this is grades 6 through 8, but it could also be used for grades 9 through 12. Read them, pick one. So if you could pick your same grade band, or you could pick an opposing grade band. Decide which 5 words you would choose for an in-depth focus. And then cite which criteria or criterion supports your choice. Your answers are going to vary. I want you to think about your potential lesson objectives and your students' learning, hypothetically or realistically. This will take you another about 10 minutes to do. Here are also some questions for deeper thought. Not only which words would you choose to teach, but which words would you avoid teaching, even though you may be tempted? Why? What additional words might you wish to provide for students who are already familiar with this vocabulary? We are always going to have students of mixed language levels. Some are going to have stronger areas and some are going to have newer areas. So you have to think about what extension activities would you provide? We're not only differentiating and scaffolding down, we're also differentiating and scaffolding up. So there's some additional materials here for you to take a look at and use. There's a vocabulary selection and instruction on page 9. You can see a great academic language focused lesson planning template. You could use this if you'd like. And there's also some student activity templates. I hope you found this helpful, and I can't wait to read your notes from the webinar, which you can turn in on Brightspace. And I hope that this is great. This is me in the library. I feel like this cat. I love being in bookstores and libraries. And here's some additional readings. So thanks for working and sharing in the webinar to go with Module 3.